When I was 5 and my brother was 4, we came down with strep throat, and in my case it turned into rheumatic fever and then rheumatic heart disease.
That's real serious.
And then my brother got nephritis. They called it Bright's disease, kidney disease. And so my mother just thought we had to take advantage of modern medicine and do what they said. They had no real solution for either of us. They just said for me, I had to take penicillin shots every month for the rest of my life.
Gee.
And my brother, they didn't have anything for. They said he'd be dead by the time he was 12.
Oh. Sounds like my specialist. I have to edit that out.
Oh, yeah, you better.
Yes.
And so that launched a huge battle in my house, where my granny women, great-grandmother, grandmother, was like, no, there are answers with plants. They were big into organic food. Food was part of medicine, lifestyle, all that. My mother's saying, no, they've got to do this, what the doctors say. And she was all about, at that time, was all about Pop-Tarts and Campbell's soup and, just all that kind of fake food.
Pop-Tarts and penicillin, there you go.
All that fake food that they thought was so wonderful. And so it was huge. And I just sat there and listened to the back and forth of all of this. And this is important. 5-year-olds really can pick up on a lot of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So it was not over my head, this conversation. And I went, okay, my grandmothers know what's going on, not these doctors. When I used to go to the doctor when they would check my heart, I used to play with them and make my heart do things that I wanted it to do. Like if I wanted to go to school, I made my heart sound okay. And if I didn't want to go to school, I made my heart sound terrible, like it had all these murmurs. And I would listen, and it was always like that. And I went, okay, these doctors don't know anything. And so I began studying with my great-grandmother, the Choctaw. She didn't talk. It was really interesting. She wasn't senile. She just went silent. She was too far out of her turf.
Did she come from a line of medicine women, or
yeah, they are on that whole side of through the Choctaw. But then my grandmother wasn't Choctaw. She was a mixture. And so it was my grandmother that took me under her wing and began teaching me about gardening and organic food and about herbs, and I just took it all in as much as I could. And every day I learn more. I just love learning. And so, it's like I know today I'm going to learn something that I didn't know yesterday. And it's so exciting.
You learned about a gimbal today.
I did. And
can't believe I taught you something.
Totally, and so.
But that's the way it goes, isn't it?
It is. And so I just have this passion for learning. So, and when you get into the plants and the interaction between plants and people and everything else, it's such a huge world that opens up. And I want to know how everything affects and influences all these different aspects.
Because there is like a web of,
totally.
Of influences back and forth.
Yeah.
And like an internet of communication that, it's interesting. It's fascinating.
It is. And this, so I get, part of the reason I got into the science is because looking at the history of the granny women and the root doctors. Part of my mission is a granny woman root doctor revival.
Well, but before you go further, what is the difference between a granny woman and a root doctor?
It's just that granny women are women and
okay. I didn't know. Okay.
If you called these days, if you call a man a granny woman, he probably wouldn't mind. But in the old days, that was a big mistake.
Well, now, when I lived in Arkansas before, I'll be honest with you, I heard the term granny woman, but it was by somebody that wasn't from the Ozarks, and they used it almost as a derogatory, just like, it was about an herbal thing that they were told, and they said, oh, that's just a granny woman thing, and it was like, I even wondered what was a granny woman, but
there was a lot of derision, the modern medicine set that in motion, saying these people don't know anything.
Yep.
It's just the root doctor, they don't know anything.
Like that, it's just a granny woman thing,
And so I'm all about the granny woman and root doctor revival, because what's happening is, for one thing, now finally medicine has caught on to the power of the plants.
Oh, yes.
And they've caught on, it's like they are actually now pouring through the ancient texts, trying to understand everything that was written all the way up through modern times, like they regret that they didn't get all the information from the granny women and root doctors before they ran them out. And because now they understand that is really where medicine's at. But let me just say this, the reason that happened, from my point of view, is that when modern medicine came along, they had the scientific vocabulary, and they had a scientific model for how all of this worked that was very impressive sounding. Whereas the granny women and root doctors didn't have the scientific vocabulary. They didn't have a scientific model to explain what they were doing, and therefore it seemed like they just didn't know. So for the granny woman and root doctor revival, it seems to me that we have now this beautiful integration possibility, and it's happening, where the tradition, what we have of it from the past, is now coming forward and being respected in a big way, and medicine has been humbled somewhat, realizing, for example, that the way they were using antibiotics was probably a big mistake.
Yeah.
And so there's an opening here from Eastern and Western, the Ayurvedic, the Chinese, the traditional Greek medicine, all of that. Everybody's starting to come together in the spirit of discovery to understand how this can be integrated with science, especially the newest science that's coming along that is supporting what the ancients knew.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, the whole business about broadband internet. The newest science that's coming along is actually looking at and analyzing plant communication. And the biophotons that are being shared between our bodies and plants, for example, and the biophotons from our DNA are transmitting and receiving information.
Well, that's one reason I have shamrocks at home. I heard that shamrocks were good for creative minds, or they were good around that. They actually vibrated a different way when people were learning or trying to learn.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. I didn't know that. That's interesting. I learned something new now.
That and gimbals, you see that?
Yeah, two
if
things.
you pay attention now.
And that's great. But they do, like, for example, here's a beautiful example. We know that Native Americans, for example, there was I don't know if this is true in all tribes, but it may have been, that they were master herbalists. But when there was an illness and the normal remedies weren't working, it was really serious they would go to the plant and sit for a whole day in meditation with the plant. And what we know now, and then after they did the meditation and asking for its healing and honoring the plant and all of that, it was like a reverence type of a feeling. Gratitude, all those emotions towards the plant while sitting with it and asking for its help. Then the next day they would harvest it and take the medicine. And what they actually had was a formula that the plant had made specifically chemically suited to just that person.
Wow.
So what's happening is these biophotons, the plants are the master chemists, and they're also the responsible for maintaining the ecosystem. So they're constantly taking in information about all the different life forms, and they can change their own chemistry in such a way to alter pretty much everything that's living in that environment. Whether they need to make the sheep sterile for a while so that they don't overgraze, they can do all kinds of things like that. So the plant is picking up information from these biophotons as a transmission of information that's telling the plant about the chemistry in this person's body, as well as their intention and a number of other things. And if it likes the person and goes, this is okay, I can help the ecosystem best by helping this person because this is someone who will nurture life and we need them here. It will alter its chemistry. And we have lots of examples now in nature, in science, where they now have shown that plants can like in 15 minutes, they can alter their chemistry. For example, in Africa, the giraffes love this one tree, and they would overeat the leaves on the tree and kill it. So the tree figured out, okay, we'll let the giraffe eat for 15 minutes, and then we're going to send a poison up to the leaf. And if it goes on beyond that, it's going to be sick. So they've worked out this collaboration. So now the giraffe knows it can eat for 15 minutes. It's fine. After 15 minutes, there's no poison there. After 15 minutes, the tree goes, time's up. It's all over the place. So the plants, if they like you, and that's why in the tradition, there's always something emphasized about you don't just go harvesting, taking stuff.
Yeah.
First, you honor the plant. You let it know who you are. You introduce yourself. You say thank you. You take care of the environment around it. Does it need some help?
And I think help it reproduce as far as
all of that.
Spreading its seeds.
And understanding who's the grandmother plant. Don't take that. I watched, when I was in the wilderness, I watched the plants for 3 years before I harvested because I wanted to make sure that they were stable and that I knew which ones I could take. So when you do that, the plants like you and they go, okay, this is one we want to keep around, and they'll give you their best medicine and their best nutrients. But if they don't like you, if they go, get rid of this guy, then they can alter their chemistry to either be ineffectual or make you outright sick. And that's one of the reasons why pharmacy doesn't like working with plain, whole plants because they're not reliable.
Depends on the customer.
You can't cut.
Does this stuff work, Doc? Well, it depends on your attitude, really.
Yeah.
And that's probably true in so many ways.
Yeah.
Even with the medicine, let's face it, your attitude can change so much.
Well, let me tell you something about that. It's so fascinating. And this is, I love that the new science is the old science, really. But we know...
It's not like new Coke,
No, we know that we're only 1% human genetically. We only have 1% of our genes are human.
Oh, okay.
99% of our genes are from our microbiome. And our microbiome being a mixture of bacteria, archaea, eukaryotes, yeast, things like that. And they're really learning about that now. So pretty much what we are is a cruise ship for all kinds of microbes. That's what we are. And we used to think that, we're the most rudimentary life form on this planet. We have 25,000 genes. That's it, of human genes.
Oh, gee.
A wheat plant has 150,000.
Oh, wow.
The worm that you use on your fishing hook has 75,000. But what we have, and this is what is incredible. Okay, it's only 25,000 genes. That makes room for, there are 100 times more genes in our microbiome than that. I forget, it's something like 200 million genes. Anyway, a lot of genes from our microbiome. And genes from the microbiome can turn on or off our human genes. And that's called epigenetics. There are other things that make that happen. But now what they're learning is, it's really exciting stuff, but the drugs, like what your microbiome is going to determine whether a drug works for you or not. And guess what makes the biggest difference in changing your microbiome? The variety of plants you eat.
Oh, wow.
And so we can't alter our genes directly, except maybe through CRISPR or something like that, which is pretty dangerous. But it turns out that what's controlling our genes is this huge microbiome. And we can change that. And there are certain things in lifestyle, it turns out, and this is the ancient knowledge, certain things in our lifestyle can alter our microbiome for the better, so that it will turn off that gene that's going to make you have diabetes or cancer. It's like if you can picture a piano with 25,000 keys on it, and a few of those keys are broken and wrong notes, those are defective genes, right? Well, whatever's playing the piano is going to control whether you get that disease. And it's the microbiome that's playing the piano, but guess what? The microbiome is influenced by our emotions, and it works both ways. It can affect our emotions. It talks. There's all this conversation going on all the time.
It's like a yin-yang thing.
Totally.
One affects the other, and one...
Totally, yeah. It's like, it's amazing. It really is. But there are things we know affect it for the better, and we're trying to figure that out now. Very exciting science where we know that if the microbiome shifted one way, it can... There's something called psychobiotics now, where they're actually looking at helping with psychosis just by changing the microbiome.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, I'm going on and on. But yeah, it's really cool.
Sip up my tea. I keep forgetting to drink my tea. You see that? You go to the trouble of making it.
Yeah, so you can see I just love the way everything ties together. And ultimately, when you follow that path along, where it takes you to is that ancient teaching that we're all one, that it's all, consciousness is primary, that everything is spiritual. There's no such thing as separating spiritual. There is no material, first of all. We know that scientifically. Now they've dumped space-time in the newest science. Forget about space-time. That doesn't even exist anymore. So it's just amazing, this world that we're living in. And plants are part of our doorway, our portal, to kind of get a peek through to the other side that we can't, because we can't perceive reality directly.
It's almost like a blind spot but the blind spot is the real thing. You can't actually, if you try to look at it too hard, it seems.
We're not made to do that, because if we did, we couldn't survive. It's like we're structured to, there's something called evolutionary biology, which is pretty interesting, that shows that we're designed to gather what I think they call them fitness tokens, that we're designed to narrow things down to look for only those things that are going to allow us to survive, like food, a place to sit, warmth. It's like everything's narrowed down to enable our survival as a species, and anything that isn't related to that or helpful can be pushed away, either just by the way our minds filter out things that are irrelevant to us, but even in the way this whole, what we call reality. There's a great book you got to read by Dan Hoffman, one of my new favorite scientists, called An Argument Against Reality.
Oh, gee.
You will love it. But this, what we call reality, is just a rendering, and the true reality on the other side is kind of where we're trying to get to in science now.